Today we're going to make a media console. I had one of the nice people at Home Depot cut down a 3/4 inch thick sheet of plywood into 12-inch wide strips. I then cut these strips of plywood to length using my compound miter saw. You can find the measurements that I used on my website. To make the front door of the cabinet, I'm going to cut 4 pieces of cedar clapboard siding. I'm going to take one of those pieces and rip it down to 3.5 inches wide. I'm going to use wood glue to glue the pieces of cedar together, leaving about 3.5 inches exposed from the overlaps. I glued the pieces together one at a time. It's also handy to have a board that's 3.5 inches wide to use as a spacer. I'm going to assemble side panels for the media console by gluing and screwing 2 pieces of plywood together. I'm going to use a piece of pipe to make the hinge for the door of the cabinet, so I need to clamp 2 of the panels together and then drill a hole through both of them in the same location. I had my buddy Charlie come over to help me assemble the cabinet. It's a pretty easy process. Basically, it's just screwing 2 layers of plywood together and leaving gaps so that another layer of plywood can fit in between. I'm going to measure and then cut a piece of baluster that'll fit right inside the smaller part of the cabinet. I'm going to drill 2 holes almost all the way through this piece of baluster. This will allow the magnets to get really close to the surface of the wood without coming through. I'm going to use a 2-part epoxy to glue the magnets to the bottom of these holes. I'm going to use a small piece of 2x3 as a brace for the inside of the smaller cabinet, and I'm just going to screw it in place with 3-inch long finished screws. I will drive additional 3-inch long finished screws into all the corners and edges of the cabinet. I used wood filler to fill in over the tops of all the finished screws, and to fill in any gaps in the edges of the plywood. While I was waiting for the wood putty to dry, I finished the cedar door with a coat of Danish oil. I hand sanded down the wood putty that was over the screws, and used an orbital sander to sand down the edges of the plywood. We painted the cabinet with 1 coat of a really nice gray-blue paint from Behr. Once the paint had dried, I screwed the baluster that had the magnets in it in the inside of the cabinet. I then measured and cut a 1/2 inch piece of copper pipe to use as part of the hinge. I'm going to place 1/2 inch copper pipe straps around the pipe and use these straps to connect to the cedar door. I'm going to use my hot glue gun to actually glue the pipe straps to the cedar first to hold it in place before I add some 1/2 inch screws to permanently fix it. I'm going to mark where the magnets are inside the baluster and then glue additional magnets to the inside of the cedar door so that they align. I'm actually going to make my own cabinet poles for this cabinet, and I'm going to do it using a silicone hexagon ice cube tray that I fill with Quikrete countertop mix. I wanted to have some different color options for these handles, so for one of the batches I added some Quikrete liquid cement color to make a darker set. After vibrating out the bubbles, I stuck in some bolts that will serve as the connections for the cabinet. After letting them cure overnight, I had a whole bunch of really nice hexagonal cabinet handles. I drilled a hole in the center of the door and then screwed the cabinet handle into place. Now, there's all sorts of different legs you could put on this cabinet. The first set that I tried was actually a set of shelf brackets from IKEA that only cost about $3 each. If you want to go with a 100% DIY approach, these are a set that I made out of 2x3s. You can click on a link here to watch how I made these legs. Hairpin legs are another nice option that really go well with sort of a mid-century modern look. I also experimented with different cabinet handle options, including ones made out of natural stone. You can find out how I made them by clicking on the video link here. For more detailed instructions, including dimension drawings, be sure to go to my website. If you want to see what I'm working on next, make sure you follow my Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thanks!